inhumane our policy is, the American people now are getting shorter. We're getting shorter. Not just losing our moral stature, but we're losing our physical stature as well. That's right. There was a gentleman who came up here, Josh, and I want to mention this because it's so important. I was preparing remarks, a speech, and I wanted to talk about the December 1999 trial that found that certain elements of the United States government were complicit in the plot to assassinate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And of course, one of the things that the American people don't know is that everything that they think they know about the murder of Dr. King is a lie. And in the course of rereading the testimony of Joe Schaap at that trial, it was clear that the news organizations that we look up to were part and parcel of the effort to destroy the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If we look at the COINTELPRO documents, starting with the first one before there was such a program as the counterintelligence program, in October of 1919, when J. Edgar Hoover discovered Marcus Garvey, he wrote, "Marcus Garvey excites the Negroes, and it's too bad that he hasn't committed a crime for which he can be deported." And so then the FBI, of course, went through the business of paying an informant to stand next to Marcus Garvey to trump up charges so they could deport him. There's certain language in that memo, though, that is particularly important. It excites the Negroes. And any authentic black person who has, quote, excited the Negroes has received similar treatment from the press. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. excited the Negroes, and he was murdered for it. Now, the testimony that came out in the trial was that the FBI had working relationships with certain journalists. They had working relationships with certain news media, and they used those relationships in order to skew general white opinion about certain blacks and what they call moderate blacks, the responsible Negro community. And that's from the New York Times, the Atlanta Journal, the Atlanta Constitution at that time, St. Louis News Post-Dispatch, the Times, New Orleans Times-Picayune. All of the newspapers that we look up to today were part and parcel of the effort to destroy our opportunity for dissent in this country. And so that's why you guys are so vitally important, because you have to start from the premise that that having CIA operatives inside the newsroom at CNN is not an anomaly. It has happened as part and parcel of our thought processes, thought control. And that's why MK Ultra, we must understand what the powers of this government have been and how they have been utilized against us, and how something as innocent as a cartoon on television might not be innocent at all. We must understand that these people wrote it down from 1919 to the 1970s. They wrote it down. We have to be smart enough to write what they wrote and understand that the technology that they have at their disposal today is far more penetrating than anything we can imagine. And so this that Josh brought me has to be part and parcel of the thought processes. There's a reason why there's a comma behind my name every time my name appears in so-called mainstream media. Y'all tell me what to call them other than that. For-profit media. There's a reason why there's a comma behind my name. There's a reason why you're taught to be afraid of me. There's a reason why they don't want black people and white people to even sit down at a table together. They wrote it down. They wrote it down because together we have the possibility of really changing this country. You have the possibility of changing this country. And the last thing I will say is that you can protect us like George Washington warned us. He said, beware the false patriots who usurp American values while wrapping themselves in our flag. He said that. And that's personified in our national leadership today. They have usurped everything that our country is supposed to stand for in the world. And they've done it while calling all of us, what? Traitors. And they've gotten away with it.
Crazy.
I'd like to make
the art and science of psychological operations, case studies of military application. The author is the United States Department of the Army.
And remember again, Operation Mockingbird.
Explain.
Good morning. I'd like to make a brief introduction, a call to action, and then my question. My name's Colleen Fernald. I'm Green Party at heart, have been registered Green Party, registered as a Democrat to vote for Lynn Woolsey in a primary. In 2006, when Cindy Sheehan decided she wasn't going to run for U.S. Senate, I decided a mother needed to run. I've got sons that are draftable. I saw the resolutions where they wanted to go and invade Iran years ago. I was running to call California to action, not as a protest, but to communicate with Dianne Feinstein, to let her know what it would take to get her vote. I got rather specific when you talked about it's about the platform. I wanted to revive Barbara Lee's bill, Resolution 82, to disavow the doctrine of preemptive invasion, not just get out of Iraq. This is a Department of Defense as it's funded. I'm an Air Force brat. I know what it means to be a patriot, to want to be protected by our military. I want my National Guard here. One of the most important things that I ran for, that she did here, was to withdraw Public Law 107-243. Congress let us go to a war without a declaration of war. I have immense respect for your voice on the House of the floor when that happened. So Dianne Feinstein got that memo from the voting public because with less than $5,000, less than 3 months, almost no help, I received almost 200,000 votes, 8% statewide average, of those that were counted properly, because I've got reports of people who tried to vote electronically, it didn't work. But she put forward a resolution to have that law sunset. No president, no matter who they are, deserves the power to go to war without a declaration of war. Please don't call it a war. Media, please don't call it a war. Call it an undeclared war. Yes, it is an occupation invasion, but please call it an undeclared war. Now, she put forth a resolution to sunset that in December, last December. It went to the Foreign Relations Committee where she sits. Did she push to have that heard? Even heard, let alone passed? No. Hold her feet to the fire, hold Pelosi's feet to the fire, hold Boxer's feet to the fire, everyone's. Now I'm running for supervisor in Sonoma County. I request of everyone, as a non-politician, run for office. When I met Dennis Kucinich in June at the Harmony Festival, he was just every bit as sincere as I had imagined. I said, Dennis, I think the way that you're going to win this time or even be heard is talk about the ticket before the primary. If people feel like they're voting for a team, maybe you got a chance. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And I've been team leader in Northern California, and I'm here with a very heavy heart. And he is fighting for his seat in Congress, and I ask you, I mean, this man paid out of his campaign funds to have the integrity of the vote respected for all of us, but at least in New Hampshire. Please send him contributions, no matter what party you are, just for the integrity of that man and his courage to run and to stand up to the status quo. Please send him contributions. Now, I've given you the call to action. My question, the reason I'm here, is I'm, looking for a way. I'm not satisfied with waiting. I'm looking for a way to get his platform revived. Ask everyone who's running for office to uphold that platform, even on the local level. I'd like him to be vice president. So my question is, what would that look like? What is the winning ticket? My question is, would a McKinney-Kucinich ticket work? I'm asking you, I'm asking this room, I'm asking America, what is the winning ticket for a sustainable United States where social and environmental integrity is upheld, where the local economy is upheld, where we have a Department of Peace at every level? That's what I'm here for. That's what I want you to go ask the public. What is the winning ticket? How can we strategize before the primaries? Please. This is a matter of life and death for our country, for our Constitution, for climate protection. Thank you. Colleen Fernald. Thank you.
Dennis, who, again, usually I never give to politicians in the two major parties. I came out of there. Cynthia McKinney would someone, of course, I would give money to. I might even have to remortgage my house. She's so good. But I actually gave money to Dennis, and Dennis is under heavy fire in Ohio, and a lot of it is a newspaper campaign of the major newspaper editorial boards that are portraying him, as out of control and egomaniac, which is directly correlated to him raising the key issues of the day. And there's really nothing new about this. The first book I did was on the decline of the Socialist Party, and really some of my great heroes, Eugene Victor Debs and Norman Thomas, and even the problem that we've had by Michael Harrington going into the Democratic Party in 1960. And by the way, many of our old friends, I remember when Richard Pearl ran against Scoop Jackson's office and had been associated with the Social Democratic wing of the Socialist Party that became this, Irving Howe once called them the Social Democrats CIA. But a lot of this, as we look back, when these politicians come under fire, I mean, Dennis is under fire for one reason, and that is there's agreements that occur within the media. One is that this war has been called a preemptive war. Now, the problem, of course, is that preemption actually has a real meaning under international law. That is when somebody is mobilizing. If I'm about to pull back and hit Cynthia, she may preempt me, right? But if I'm over there by the wall and she says, Bob Fitrakis, you might want to hit me one day, and she comes up and whacks me with a baseball bat, that is not preemption. That is a violent, illegal assault, and it falls under the doctrine of preventive war, right? And the last people that argued this, we should be clear, were the Nazi generals before they were hung at Nuremberg, right? It was that this is an absolute illegal war. It violates American principles. It violates the principles of Nuremberg, Article 6. Section 1 and 2, because you cannot conspire, plan, and wage an illegal war. And the reality is, if 2/3 of a country is under a no-fly zone and well over 1 million of their people and 500,000 of their children have already been killed, you can't go over and attack them to settle old scores and make a ton of money. And I mean, what it is, and we should counterpose it, it's a hijacking, it's a carjacking, it is the same criminal activity, and we need to hammer away. Our president is a war criminal. We cannot ignore the plain language that George W. Bush is a war criminal, and we need to repeat that as often as possible.
Not only George W. Bush, but there are many members of his administration who are also war criminals. Anyone who aided and abetted in the decision to go to war, not only those people, but also the so-called coalition of the willing, those international leaders, and I'm involved in litigation, international litigation, that hopefully will result in indictments against all of these war criminals. The question I have for you, this is a deviation from the format, but I read a headline just a few days ago that said anti-war movement, something like this, anti-war movement drops demand to end the war. Now who did that? Who did that? Who made did that decision on our behalf? So already now, there's, from the great Wurlitzer in the sky, someone has dropped some talking points. And believe me, they do operate by talking points. Someone has dropped some talking points that said, okay, they have literally changed, they have reframed the debate because they were losing on ending the war. They were losing in public opinion. So now what they've done is they said, okay, we're not going to try to end the war anymore. You, all of you so-called anti-war people, you're not trying to really pull American troops out. Now, we've seen them reframe our anti-war movement in our faces before our very eyes. And I think that deserves a very strong rejoinder from the community. I don't know how to do it. You guys are the experts. But that certainly needs to be done.
Where was it written?
It's been in the headlines, so-called mainstream media. And apparently there was a meeting of organizations that decided that 15 or so organizations got together and decided they weren't going to ask the Congress, the Democrats in Congress, to stop funding the war.
Hi, first I just want to thank you, Cynthia, for the work you've done. I think you're the most on-target politician that America has had and has right now, and you deserve a lot more praise than you've been given, especially for having the courage to speak on the most crucial issues like the elections and 9/11. And the name of this conference is Publicizing Truths with Consequences, and I don't think there's any truths with more consequences than that of the elections and 9/11, and you've been the only politician with the wisdom and courage to come out and speak those truths. The only. And you've been doing what Dennis Kucinich and the rest of the progressive leaders and media should be doing, because as you know, 9/11 and elections is the foundation of everything they've been doing. The torture, the detentions, the undeclared wars, the reason that they get away with all of it is because of the official story on 9/11 and their supposed legitimacy through being elected twice, which is completely untrue. And until we get at those fundamental lies that are the foundation for their entire agenda, nothing's going to change. So although I think it's great that we talk about how immoral the Iraq war is, the sad truth is until we talk about 9/11, nothing's going to change, because they're going to keep using the threat of terrorism as the reason for why that war has to continue, why we might have to go into Iran, et cetera, why we have the Homegrown Terrorism Act, Protect America Act, Military Commissions Act, Patriot Act, on and on and on. And so my question to you is, since you know what the most important truths are, and you've been having the courage to say that, there's been talk here about officializing the truth that needs to get out and getting it out of the marginalized area and getting it into the public sphere. And you've been the most legitimate, you have been the only legitimate source of that information at this point. And my question to you and my friends from Oregon is, Is your campaign for presidency that vehicle, the Green Party with its legitimacy, you with your legitimacy? Can that be the vehicle to get 9/11 truth and elections truth out and then reverse this insanity that we've been going through for the past 7 years? If that's one component, if you have any other recommendations for how we can get these most crucial truths out to the public and break this mythology that's tearing America and the world apart.
You start.
Cynthia's asked me to start. I'm just saying that Cynthia McKinney's campaign will be the necessary vehicle for opening up a wide range of discourse. I mean, what's happened and what we know, and I referred to Operation Mockingbird earlier, you know, at various times, those of you, and I know there's people in this room that study this, when the CIA infiltrated a quarter of all cultural organizations in the United States, including fraternities and sororities, and subverted the National Student Association, and controlled most of the newspaper. And even a few years ago, you know, when they admitted they still owned 20 to 25 newspapers. And you remember that famous quote, you know, it's sort of like why they like journalists, because they were cheaper than a good hooker and more useful. Not that they didn't use hookers in Operation Midnight Climax, for those of you who remember the whole LSD experiments, which is another whole element of the mind control. But I think, you know, when you look at what they're doing, is what they're not counting on is a breakthrough where people begin to talk about a lot of things that we know, that the public knows, but, you know, courage is contagious. And, you know, I mean, Greg Pallas said that, you know, Cynthia had Tourette syndrome, but I never saw it as that. You know, I came from a born-again evangelical tradition. You know, I see it as she's willing to actually speak truth to power, which is the fundamental definition of righteousness in the Old Testament. And her campaign will be the vehicle for shining a light on a whole lot of things that we simply don't talk about. One of my, I mean, Kevin Phillips mentioned, you know, here's the architect of the modern republic, that the Bush family is 4 generations of war profiteers. He just comes out and spells it out and says, you know, let's look at Samuel Prescott Bush, buried in Green Lawn Cemetery in Columbus, Ohio. And this man gets appointed to the Armament Board, gives his company, Buckeye Steel Casting, which he inherited from Frank Rockefeller, an unbid contract. And then he goes on and gives Percy Rockefeller, John Dee's cousin, who had just bought up, you know, Remington, gives him an unbid contract. These people, they were run out of Columbus because Prescott Bush, who went on to launder money for the Nazis, which when Harvey Wasserman and I wrote that, you know, taking it from the Holocaust scholars, we were viciously attacked everywhere, and I'm sitting in bed, and then the AP crawler at the bottom, and Prescott Bush tied to the Nazis, you know. I was like, that was it. I mean, major stories, 4 generations of people that have funded war profiteers all over the world, and the person most qualified, you know, I wish, you know, I was in this role, but I know the woman at this point in history most qualified to bring these things forward. And I think her campaign, and we all know, is our campaign. And it is the campaign for truth. And we can really rock this country because people understand that they have crushed down the wages. They have exploited. They've destroyed one of the greatest economies in the world, and they've brought death and misery. So I'm looking forward to this battle.
And of course, it's not fair to put all of the burden on me.
I got you back.
So Bob, you got to run for office too. He's speechless.
I did that in 2006.
Got to do it again.
I'm willing to get out there. I'll see what's left.
Right. Very good. And I've endorsed Cindy Sheehan's campaign for Congress. Cindy shows us what is actually inside all of us. There's another woman here, I think she's here, she may not be in this room, but I think she's at this conference, Colleen Rowley. Was she at the? Yes. When Colleen should be in the United States Congress right now. But Rahm Emanuel didn't think she deserved a slot there. Isn't that right?
I describe it in more generous terms. He has a large dollar sign tattooed on his forehead. And money is, unfortunately, really it just clouds everybody's judgment. So that's the sad truth about it.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, here's one of the patriots. And the Democratic Party couldn't get behind one of our patriots. So now, then that means that it's not about party, because the parties have shown us, Democrat, Republican, our value for peace, ending the war, well, it didn't happen. Our values for civil liberties, well, it didn't happen. Our values for even tax justice, Democrats are in the majority, well, it didn't happen. So now we've got to understand that it's about every one of us becoming the government that really the government is supposed to be. It is us. And once we understand our own ownership, then we can take that next step. Ralph Nader wrote a piece about taking the next step, and he called out the names of people who have made criticisms but who haven't taken the next step. Well, I took the next step. I left the party, and I decided that I would run for office on this platform of truth and peace. And now we've got to have thousands of people across this country do the same thing. It's in this room, I hope. And certainly, if the candidates aren't in this room, the reportage on those people who take that next step is in this room.
Somebody passed you now.
I join with the theme of this conference of telling our own truths and paying as little attention as possible to the corporate media, but I do want to take one of their suggestions that we call somebody president who has yet to be elected and address this question to President McKinney and Governor Fitrakis. This comes from our group. What do you see as the inhibitors for people to understanding their power to take action, and including those who don't believe that change is going to come through the electoral process?
Well, again, I think we've really got to focus on the fact that the electoral process is one way, and in some ways not the most efficient way, but one way to make social change, that the electoral process must be tied up to real social movements in the street and in this country, and that historically, I mean, if you think about it, the campaign of the Socialist Party in 1908 became the platform of FDR in 1936. But the key thing, and I could see this happening, is that I think we have to see these election campaigns as uncompromising moral crusades. The first thing that happens when you get involved in politics is, I remember when I ran for Congress against John Kasich in 1992, people would meet me with lots of money and ask me if I was flexible. And I'm thinking, what in the hell? You know, it's like, oh, what exactly does that mean? And I learned to realize is that if I moderated all of my positions and sold my soul, there was plenty of money available. And the key issue in 1992, I had started out with Tom Harkin, and I ended up with Jerry Brown, and I was his platform spokesperson in 1992. And there was this thing going on called NAFTA. And I was the platform, and they didn't want me to speak on it. And I talked about the dire consequences